Okay, testing. Okay. Testing. See, the audio quality is not as good, but it is what it is. Oh, did you get that audio?
I just turned it down.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. So what happened was I have a nicer microphone. You're noticing that the audio quality is probably a little lower, but that microphone, luck as it would be, broke during the stream after Bree and I had tested it and everything. So I'm recording on my webcam microphone. The quality is not going to be as good, but tomorrow morning I'm going to go buy a new microphone, maybe get a better one than the one I had. So, we'll have a higher quality sound going forward, hopefully, or at least the same quality. But for live streams anyway, the quality usually comes across as lower regardless, because it lowers the quality of recording to stream it live. So there might not be as big of a difference as you would notice in an actual recording. So as I noted on the first stream, I just kind of want to see where you guys take this. We're talking Canadian and American politics. We're going to be taking your questions, your concerns, comments, and we'll go probably until about 10 o'clock, and then we'll see about then. But if the stream dies out earlier, we'll die earlier than that. I'm just going to quickly share this on social media, get people to come to the stream.
Joshua Hunt says loads of trolls on your video comments lately.
Yeah. I mean, you're right about that. Loads of trolls, and that sucks. Don't get me wrong. Hey Omar, how's it going? Yeah, Sarah, you're right. Trolls are a double-edged sword. You don't want them, of course, but you get them when your videos start to perform well. You get them when you cover hot button issues that trolls want to talk about. Whenever you attack conservative parties, or whenever you talk about Donald Trump in a negative manner, or hateful groups in a negative manner, will show up on your comment section and on social media. I have noticed the one good thing now, though, is that when I used to do that, I made some videos about Faith Goldie and Lauren Southern early on in my YouTube channel, when I had 500-600 subscribers, maybe less even, when I made some of those videos. And I have to say that those videos would be absolutely swamped with alt-right, bot accounts and hateful comments, because I didn't have a lot of fans. I didn't have a lot of people who regularly watched my videos, and so no one would be sticking up for me in the comments. And now a lot of you guys here on the screen, but also just people in general, will help me, comment on these issues and defend a progressive position, and to call out, hateful comments. I delete some of them that are truly vile. I try not to. I don't want to stifle space on my wall, but if people use, hateful slurs, I do try to delete them. And if you guys ever see comments like that, let me know, and I will delete them, because they have no place on my wall. There's discourse, and then there's just being rude and being discriminatory and being mean, you know what I mean? And I think there's a fundamental difference there.
Matthew says that trolls drive engagement.
No, you're right, Matthew. And this is actually a thing I found out afterwards, when I was like, well, I'm getting a lot of downvotes on this video. Is that going to hurt my video? And people are like, no, downvotes and upvotes basically count the same way. And comments, be they positive or negative, count the same way. Which is why YouTube channels will always say, like, comment, and subscribe, because all three of those things are YouTube's signals to, this is a good video, or this is a good channel. I better show it to more people who might like it. So there's those three things, and then there's also watch time, like total amount of time watched. People clicking, watching for a few seconds, and then piecing out, or are people watching the whole video and then going to watch more videos by that creator? If it's the latter, then think that's actually a good thing. And YouTube's like, oh, we like this guy, or we like this girl. Let's show them to more people. So you're right that if they're coming and watching my videos angrily and typing out their hate comments, it doesn't hurt me. It doesn't hurt me. But I am cognizant of the fact that, look, I'm like a straight white guy on the internet. It's not, we still get hate and we still see bad comments, but it does concern me because like if I was a progressive woman making YouTube videos, or if I was a person of color, that hate would probably be much more intense and much more personally directed at me in a harmful manner. So I'm cognizant of the fact that we can all, in a sense, have a bit of a chuckle about it, but that's not the same for everybody. So I think that's an important thing to remember. Also, Brianna is here. We noted this on the previous stream. Brianna's here. Brianna, wave to the camera or give your thumbs up. Yeah, there it is. Brianna's here to help me read some questions. It makes it a little bit easier on me. I don't have to both read the questions and narrate the chat. So if we do miss one for whatever reason, just post it again if we haven't read it in a few minutes. It's nothing personal. We'll try to get to each and every question.
Why don't you state of the channel?
Yeah, state of the channel is going pretty good. I mean, the channel's growing. We have the technical or the occasional technical issue on our live streams, as you guys just saw, but the channel is approaching 3,000 subscribers. We'll probably hit 2,800 tonight or tomorrow. I continue to work with other YouTubers. Look for a video probably in the next couple days with me on David Dole's channel. I've been on his channel a couple times before. We'll be talking a bit there. I've been talking about collaborations with some other YouTubers. I don't want to say, before we've confirmed anything, but yeah, but that's, that is where it is. So the channel's growing and I'm very happy.
Okay, Matthew Daniels has asked any highlights from the he missed Bernie on Rogan. He wants highlights.
I actually haven't seen it yet. Brianna and my son Demetrios got back from a trip, and so today was getting ready for them to be home and stuff. I haven't seen it yet. The one thing I've seen above all right now is Bernie saying that if there's really aliens and he becomes president, he promises to tell us if the aliens are real. And I think that's probably the biggest part of the interview. I mean, it's not healthcare or foreign policy or free education or drug decriminalization. No, it's the aliens, but I'm not sure. I'll be certain to give it a watch. I don't know if I'll do a video on it. I think there's going to be a lot of people with takes about Bernie and on Joe Rogan's show, because for those who don't know, Joe Rogan is sort of known, or was known for a long time, as the fear factor guy, and he was a relatively middle of the road actor, and then became famous for being one of the UFC ringside commentators. But since then has become literally his podcast. I don't know, it gets like 60 million listeners or something. It's absolutely absurd how big his podcast is. So it's kind of important Bernie goes there. Joe Rogan is something of a ideologically eclectic guy. On some issues, he's very right-wing. He has some troubling positions in regards to women's issues and LGBTQ issues from time to time. On the other hand, he's very much against, the police state as it pertains to drugs. So Bernie going on his channel, I think, is very important, because if you want to reach young men especially, there may be no better platform than on Joe Rogan's podcast, as crazy as that sounds.
Okay, Omar wants your thoughts on Sidewalk Labs Toronto.
I mean, just to clarify, is that the Google project where they're basically partnering with the city to use big data to help plan the city's infrastructure and whatnot? I just want to clarify if that's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Google Smart City.
Yeah, see, I'm not. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify. Yeah, that's that. I'm very skeptical of those things. Like, I mean, I understand that there's great value in all the information that Google collects, and that they can do some pretty amazing things with it. I mean, if you look at your YouTube algorithm, it often does pair my videos with Ben Shapiro's, which is not good algorithmic planning. But I find that YouTube every once in a while shows me some really great content that I wouldn't have found if I looked for it manually. And I mean, that's pretty cool. But in terms of handing a private, foreign, massive multinational corporation effectively the systems of city planning, I'm very concerned by it. I'm very concerned. I think that, working with universities to do similar things, I think could provide good results and maybe less intrusive results in terms of, private industry invading public space. But I mean, I'm not exactly an expert on the technology itself, but more concerned about the political implications therein.
Okay, Lisa Hildebrandt says death threats to journalists like Glenn Greenwald, who exposed President Bolsonaro of Brazil, and imprisonment of Julian Assange is upsetting. What are your thoughts on the safety of journalists?
I mean, I think that it's a big concern, and I mean, whether you agree with Assange, or whether you agree with Greenwald, or whether you agree with any particular journalist, I do feel that that there is an increasing animosity towards the press, especially from the right, which is ironic given that so much of the media leans right. I mean, it's we on the left that should really be concerned with media bias and fake news, if we're being honest, but it's not leftists that are threatening journalists. If you remember during Donald Trump's run to president, his campaign was, I don't know if there was officially his campaign merchandise, but Trump people were wearing shirts basically threatening journalists. And journalists would often get accosted at Trump events just for simply covering them in a truthful manner. I think it's extremely concerning. And I think one concern here in Canada is that, the courts have sort of sided against journalists being able to protect their sources. There was that recent case where a journalist interviewed somebody who had gone off to the Middle East to be an insurgent, and had spoken with the media, and the government had forced the person to reveal their source. People are very concerned about that. And another concern nowadays is there's a general understanding in our courts in Canada that journalists have certain protections around their speech that are more stringent even than the average citizen. And I think that's probably for the best, because journalists more than regular people are have a motive to be silenced by the rich and the powerful and those who have something to hide. But in our own time, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find out who are to determine what a journalist is, right? Like, am I a journalist? I don't know. I'm more of a commentator, but like David Dole, who does a little bit more journalism than I do, we have a similar ideological view and we both do similar stuff, but is he a journalist? And if so, like, should he be given journalist protections? I don't know. My answer would be yes, but I don't think he would be recognized as one. So we're entering this real gray area where, if we believe journalists are under threat and we need to protect them, well, then what's a journalist? And is Ontario News Now, Doug Ford's essentially his fake news wing of the government, are they journalists? I would say no, but I mean, like, are they? I don't know, right? And it's like there's a whole bunch of questions, like the attack on press freedom, but also what is the press in 2019 and over the next 10, 20 years? And that's a question I don't know if we have an answer for as a society.
Okay, going off that question.
Yeah.
Franco Baldino wants to know, in terms of Canadian news, which journalists do you trust view the most? I
mean, I don't want to, like, in terms of specific journalists, I'm not fully sure. I mean, I don't want to give out specific names. In terms of sources, I would say that I generally like Ricochet as a source. Canadian Dimension has good stuff. If you want labor news, rankandfile.ca is good. If you want Canadian coverage, frankly, as you guys have seen, the Washington Post will publish good Canadian articles, good articles about Canadian politics. Now, some of them are by J.J. McCullough, who is clearly on the right, but they also publish myself and David Moskrop and Nora Loretto and others on a more ad hoc basis. And I think they do great work. So, I mean, the Washington Post is good. The Toronto Star has a whole bunch of liberal apologia, but their labor news is very good. I mean, we don't have if we were going to subscribe to a newspaper, it would probably be the Star, and it might just be to support their labor coverage, because it's really top notch. They did that really good investigative study where their labor journalist, she went undercover in a meat processing plant where a woman had died, I think a few months prior. A bakery. And she had a young woman had died a few months prior, and it was just talking about how this work was effectively illegal because of the nature of the work, the way the employer-employee relationship was, the health and safety violations. And she went into this very dangerous situation, and it was great. It was great work that no other source in Canada does, because even the left-wing labor media, they don't have the resources to pay someone to go undercover and do that work. I mean, only a big newspaper could do that. Other sources, the Our Times magazine is good. Rabble is uneven, but has some good stuff. The National Observer, again, there's a lot of pro-liberal stuff in there, but they have some good coverage on the environment if you're interested in environmental coverage. Those are some of the good sources that I would recommend. Reddit, going to Reddit is often good. Reddit gives you a bit of everything, and you have to be more critical because you have to know, like, okay, where is this source from? But Reddit's good because it sort of brings you stories from all sorts of sources. So it's a better sense of, like, well, how are left-wing and right-wing and mainstream media talking about particular issues? So I use Reddit a lot for that.
Okay, Joshua Hunt wants to know, besides David Joel, do you ever connect with other left YouTubers?
I have. I've had discussions with Michael Brooks. He's talked a bit about my work, and we've talked a bit about, how Canadian news is sort of misunderstood in the United States. So we've had some chats. The Humanist Report was just featured on their channel, where they did the episode on the response to the incidents in Ohio and in Texas, and he shared one of my clips. I've been talking a bit with the Serfs. They're going to be doing some Canadian politics stuff, so we might connect on that. So I'm starting to build more and more connections with larger YouTubers. Peter Coffin as well doesn't really do strictly politics. He does more artistic stuff, but Peter Coffin also featured some of my content on his channel a few weeks back. So those are some of the ones I've engaged with. I mean, there's lots of creators I like. I mean, if you go to BreadTube, if you go to Reddit and you go to BreadTube, you'll see a ton of great creators, big ones and small ones, some way bigger than me, of course, but some quite a bit smaller than me who need a lot of attention. So I would say go to BreadTube to see a good bunch of, like, left-leaning creators who make about politics, but also equity issues and foreign relations and philosophy and political economy. Yeah, it's a great subreddit.
Monkey Liberty 86 wants to know what your views are on the paradox of intolerance.
Like, is that you? Do you mean to say, like, you have to be intolerant of intolerance because you can't tolerate, so you shouldn't be able to tolerate far right speech because it's by definition is intolerant. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
It's the idea that a tolerant society will eventually be seized by intolerance.
I mean, I don't know if I would go that far to say that tolerance necessarily leads to an intolerant society, but I do feel that there's a difference between being tolerant and respectful of debate. On the one hand, which is good, even with people we disagree with, even with people on the right sometimes, and on the other hand, debating people who question the basic human rights and dignity of others, be it on social or economic or cultural terms, or people who are simply debating in bad faith. And I think in those latter two cases, you shouldn't tolerate, discourse with those people, because at some point you're legitimizing them. If they're not actually speaking to you truthfully, then, like, you shouldn't dialogue with liars. And you shouldn't dialogue with somebody who's like, let's debate whether a group of people deserves to live or not. Like, we shouldn't be tolerant of that debate. And so I'm of the view that there is a limit to what we should tolerate as a debate within the bounds of respectable debate. And I know that can be used against us on the left, but it's already being used against us on the left. I think we just have to stand up for the fact that basic human rights are non-negotiable, and people of the far right don't deserve to be seen as respectful contributors to our societal discourse. And I think, like, that's a major factor in fighting back against hate. And I know that that's tricky because it's like, well, where do you draw the line? But I don't know. That's my instinct, at least.
Lisa Hildebrandt says, I would like to see Jagmeet Singh do more live streaming of his town hall and meet and greets. As the election progresses, this might set him apart from the others and give him more exposure. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I think, and Jagmeet is a young guy. He's very hip, and I think he could make it authentic. I think that live streaming is great for a few reasons. One, it's something young people are doing, and you want to reach young people and energize them. Going where they are is important. CBC News World and CTV News World, they're not there. Like, that's not where most young people are. But they are on Twitch, and they are on YouTube, and they are on Facebook, and they are on Instagram, and they are on Twitter, and you can live stream from many of those sources. And you can let people know of live streams on those sources. And I don't just think it has to be town halls. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, if you guys remember, last year she streamed like just cooking in her kitchen. She was like hanging out in her kitchen, cooking, chatting with people about issues and factors and her experience, going to Congress and all of these things. And I think that played really, really well. And at the end of the day, I think that was a great thing. I think Jagmeet Singh could do that. And I think another factor is that if mainstream media will undercover you or miscover you, there is a certain value in direct media, which is to say, like, go live to the people. And like the CTV and CBC can't decide not to cover it. It'll go to the people. It won't be a town hall, and you hope the CBC and CTV and Global show up to record it. But if they don't, it goes unnoticed. You do it live. You get that direct access. So that's something I think they should consider doing more. And maybe they will, but I don't have a direct instinct or line into the party's policy on that regard.
Staffy17 asks, in Canada, do we get information about total number of unique donors to political parties?
Not really. Part of the issue is that in Canada, donors don't have to be recorded. Donations under $20. I'm just going to mute my phone here. Donations under $20 don't have to be recorded. So if you go to a fundraiser for the NDP or what have you, and you give the candidate $5, they don't have to record it. And so you could pass the hat, and people can throw in loonies and toonies and fivers and tenors, and they don't have to record it. Now, those are all individual donations, but they're never recorded. And in Ontario, at least during the last provincial election, you were only recorded for a donation, I think, if you donated more than $100. And of course, most people don't donate more than $100. So what you could do is you could say which party's got the most donations, and the NDP actually won in donations even above 100. We beat the Conservatives. Now, the Conservatives had much higher donations than we did, but we had quite a bit of donations. Now, it doesn't include, again, people who gave $25, $35, $45. Now, I don't know if that applies to every province. I'm only, confident about Ontario. Other provinces might require every donor, even under $100 to officially be noted. But we don't have a strict every donor is recorded policy here in Canada. It mostly captures larger donors, and that is public information. It's how we know that Warren Kinsella made a giant donation to Doug Ford's PCs and, rightfully got called out on social media for it. It's because he made like $1,000 donation. If you look me up on Elections Ontario, you'll see that I've made donations to the NDP. You can see that it's public information.
And Jerry Diaz donated to Kelly Leach.
And Jerry Diaz donated to Kelly Leach. Yes, he did. He did indeed.
Okay. Joshua Hunt says, what do you think Canadian politics will look like in 20 years?
Geez, that's a good question. Oh, that would be a good, that might be a great video, I think. Wouldn't that be like a good video? Maybe it would be, but I think like a few factors are going to be, Canada is going to be increasingly diverse. Canada will be a younger country in 20 years because the boomer generation will be increasingly, passing on. And in their place, the country will be younger. Canada will likely see I would say probably the same level of immigration as a proportion of the population, but maybe even more. So you'll likely see, again, that's the diversity factor, but also probably in most immigrants being younger, a youth factor, and those will transform Canadian politics. Other issues are going to include the intensifying rural-urban divide. I see no reversal of the trend of, the cities becoming bigger and bigger proportionally in terms of like the vote division and what that means for our politics. Now, in some cases, people are leaving cities like Toronto, but they're just going to cities like Hamilton. And they're effectively, big cities are growing in any case. And so I think it'll be interesting to see, migration patterns in Canada from small towns in the countryside into the suburbs and big cities, and maybe in continued migration patterns out of provinces like the Maritimes to places like Ontario and Quebec and what have you. Another factor is going to be like, if we have environmental crisis, how will that affect politics? How will that affect areas that are affected by flooding and drought and fire, and what that'll mean for our politics? Another factor, again, is the effects of automation. I'm not necessarily an alarmist with automation, but if, let's say, some of the people are right, and in the next 20 years, all the people who drive for a living, or most of them, lose their jobs. That's a big portion of the economy. When you add in taxi drivers and people who drive trucks and people who drive, long haul trucks and short haul trucks, there's a lot of people. Certain parts of the country, in the U.S., for instance, there are multiple states where the most common job is like truck driver. And so in a sense, the effects of automation could have major effects. I think we're heading into an age of polarization. I think the neoliberal center, I don't think will hold over the long term. And I'm hopeful that the left wins out in this debate. And I'm hopeful that we have a system of proportional representation. But I mean, these are all just musings. I mean, I guess ideally, my hope is that in 20 years from now, Jagmeet Singh is celebrating his 19th year as prime minister. Maybe that's the best case scenario, though.
Okay, Joshua Hunt is enthusiastic for you to do that as a video. And Franco Baldino says, I don't think I've seen your comments on Bill 21 in Quebec. Any thoughts? And that's, of course, the secularism.
Yeah.
bill.
I mean, I'm against it. I understand that Quebec has certain idiosyncrasies that make it different from English Canada. And I also get that not everyone who supports Bill 21 is doing it from a position of intolerance. I get that, but I think at its core, it's a bad idea. I don't think it's in line with the values of a secular society, as ironic as it is, because to me, a secular society is also a pluralistic society. Like, if you want to have true secularism, which is to say the state does not involve itself in religion, either for a religion or against a religion, then you need to have pluralistic society. So I don't support like the French model of secularism, which is, anti-religion in some cases. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it reflects the values of Quebec history. A lot of people say it's rooted in the Quiet Revolution, but the Quiet Revolution, a lot of people say it was a rejection of religious symbol and religious control. And in part, that's true. But the Quiet Revolution was also about better recognizing the rights of non-Catholic Quebecois. It was about giving more protections to Protestants, yes, but specifically minority groups like Jews and Jehovah's Witnesses. There wasn't very many Muslim Quebecois or Muslim Canadians at all in the 50s and 60s. But the reality is that for me, the true spirit of Quebec's new quick movement to secularism was about welcoming all people, be they Catholic or be they no religion or be they another religion. And I think Bill 21 is in direct opposition to that. So I'm not a fan of it at all. And I know it's popular in Quebec. I know it's largely a popular bill, or at least it's not unpopular. But I don't support it. I don't support it.
Okay, Thrice Fan 89. Who do you think will win the federal election if it's a cons? What do you think of strategic voting? I'm proud and kind of embarrassed to say that I voted NDP last election, even though Goodall was my MP.
Yeah, I mean, I don't support strategic voting. I mean, on the one hand, people can vote for whoever they want to vote for, and they can rationalize it however they want to rationalize it. If they want to vote for the party that's going to give them the biggest tax cut, fine. If they want to vote for a party that can stop another party, fine. If they want to vote for the candidate who's the most handsome or pretty, fine. Like, I don't care. You have the right to vote for whoever you want, however you want. But I'm not a fan of strategic voting personally. And I mean, I only vote for the NDP. I would always vote for the NDP. The only case I might not vote for the NDP is in a Quebec provincial election where I would likely vote Quebec Solidaire. Like that's like the only exception. Even in New Brunswick and PEI, where the NDP isn't very strong, I would vote for the NDP before I would vote for the Greens. That's just me. In terms of who I think will win, right now, if you look at the polls, it's looking like a very, very close race between the Liberals and Conservatives that's trending towards a minority government. And so in that case, I would give the edge to the Liberals for a couple reasons. One, it's rare that in Canada we throw out governments after one election. It happens, but Harper was elected twice or multiple times. Martin, I think, was only elected once, I believe, but Chrétien was elected multiple times, Mulroney multiple times, Trudeau multiple times, Pearson multiple times, Diefenbaker multiple times. Like, most Canadian prime ministers got at least 2 kicks at the can, sometimes with a reduced level of support. And another reason is Trudeau seems to have an edge in Ontario right now. And that's where there's, like, if you can get an edge in Ontario, you can rack up seats. But I think the most likely scenario is a minority government. And I think that's a good thing because as it stands, the NDP looks to be the party that would hold the balance of power. So the Liberals may not finish in first, but the NDP could prop up a Liberal government in exchange for progressive policy, like electoral reform, or like a truly universal and comprehensive dental care and pharmacare plan. So I think like this could shape up to be a good election for progressives. And I think that if you are truly a anything but conservative strategic voter, your goal shouldn't be a Liberal majority, because the Liberal majority governments are never accountable to the people who actually voted for them. The only Liberal governments that are even partially accountable to the people that gave them power are Liberal minority governments. So if I'm a strategic voter, I'm like, where can I elect NDP MPs to ensure that the Liberals do not get a majority and that the NDP hold the balance of power? To me, that's the most important question if you're truly a progressive strategic voter.
Okay. Just Me says, first time I've been involved in policies, probably my last year too. Is your election process as long as our primaries are? I'm so ready for it to be over with, and it's just started.
No, ours are a bit different. So the way ours work is that we elect our leaders to a party, but they're usually done within the party itself, and it's not quite as open to the general populace. Now, anyone can join a party. Like, you can't, and usually it just costs like a token amount of money. The NDP you can join for as little as $5 a year if you're a student or if you're low income. But the way it works is we elect our leaders, and we have our and we elect our at the local riding associations. We select our candidates for all the 338 ridings, but our elections themselves are much shorter. Our leadership campaign here in the NDP lasted just a few months, and most elections in Canada go for about 6 to 8 weeks. Now, there's some exceptions, however. This period right now, we're not technically in an election period, but we know there's almost certainly going to be an election on October 21st, 2019. So everyone's sort of in campaign mode right now. But officially, our elections are only a few weeks long, and we have less elections in general. When a majority government happens at the federal, that means you probably won't have another election for 4 and sometimes even 5 years. And sometimes you get fewer elections, like you might get a minority government and then a year and a half later get another election. That happens, but we don't have the rolling system that you guys have, where you have a third of the Senate gets elected every 2 years, the president every 4, and the House, the entire House every 2 years. We don't do that. Our Senate is unelected, and our House is they're always all elected at the same time, unless there's an empty seat, in which case there's something called a by-election, basically a special election to fill that seat. So our process is much, much shorter. and we have less of the perpetual campaign that you guys have.
Okay, that atheist says, loving the live streams. Do you think the Ontario Liberals are delaying a leader until after the federal election for the benefit of Trudeau?
I would say so, not just for the benefit of Trudeau, but I mean, all the parties do stuff for the benefits of their federal parties, especially when there's a connection. The Doug Ford, for instance, and I think he's failing. Doug Ford, for instance, is not doing anything right now in legislature at Queen's Park because he doesn't want to anger voters anymore that it hurts Andrew Scheer. He's basically hiding until after the election. That's my belief. And it's not going to work because his scandals continue to build up and the effects of his decisions continue to build up. And we in the NDP, if you guys, any of you are members of the party, there was an email that went out yesterday basically saying that from now until the end of the election, we're not fundraising provincially. We're not fundraising from now to the end of the federal election provincially. So riding associations, MPPs will not be going out fundraising for their own re-elections until the federal election is over. That's at least here in Ontario. And the Liberals, I think, they're waiting because they don't want to take away attention and activists from the federal thing. But I think it's also that they know that they're not going to get any news coverage. If they hold it in September, there's going to be no news coverage for a provincial leadership convention of the Ontario Liberals when the federal election is happening. And maybe there are some high-profile Liberal MPs who consider running for the leadership but want to know what their fate is in the election. I'm not suggesting this will happen, but what if, for example, Chrystia Freeland lost her seat federally? Maybe she wants to take a crack at being premier. I don't know. Like, that's for an example. And maybe they feel like if they wait a little bit longer, they'll get more talent and they'll get more media attention. Because after that election, in Ontario, it will be in sort of a dark spot for politics because we're still a long ways away from 2022. And if it's even if it's a minority, we'll probably have it at least last a year and a half, which is generally what happens in federal politics. Minorities last about a year and a half. So the Liberals are like early 2020, good time to have the leadership convention. I don't think they're wrong. I think it's probably good timing.
Okay, Jason Pichet asks, can you give us a tour of your bookshelf or recommend your favorite books about Canadian politics?
I mean, I could certainly. I don't know if I want to give you guys a tour right now. That might also be a video. It'd be kind of awkward here, and Brianna's right here. And so I have a lot of books here. They mostly relate to my research. I have some that I've written myself. I have a book called The Constant Liberal that I wrote about Pierre Trudeau, which is right here on the shelf. Yeah, there's right here. Brianna's going to pass it. Woo, is that right here? You can get that from ubcpress.ca. Of course, you can buy it from Amazon, but don't try to avoid buying stuff from Amazon. You can maybe get it in your local bookstore. Some of them have it, and you can get it in your public library or at your local university library. And even if you're not affiliated, you can often go in and just read the books and get like guest passes and whatnot. There's also a whole bunch of good books on Pierre Trudeau that I've written. Not all I agree with, but that are very good. In terms of books that have and authors that have been important to me, obviously my PhD supervisor, Ian Mackay, has written a ton of books that are really good on the history of the left. So have people like Brian Palmer and Greg Keeley. These are the big historians of labor and the working class in Canada. They're all academics, so their books aren't necessarily page turners, but they're all pretty decent writers as far as academics go, which is one of the reasons they're so well known. And so those are really good books to look at in general. But I do think, again, that might be an interesting video to maybe do a tour of my bookcase and things like that, or do a book recommendation video. Again, one of the things I can recommend is there's an edited collection I'm recently a part of called Party of Conscience. It's edited by Roberta Lexier, Stephanie Bangarth. I don't know if I only have one copy. It's on the shelf somewhere. And John Weir. It's a big edited or a small edited collection of left-wing authors. Brianna's gonna see if she can find it right there. There we go. It's right here. Ooh, here it is. Ooh, I know it's mirrored. Maybe I don't know if that's just me. Is it? No. Okay. Yeah. Is it? Is the? Yeah. Is the stream?
Just keep
yeah.
going.
This Party of Conscience. It's a great source for left-leaning content about the NDP and the CCF. And one thing I can also recommend is the Graphic History Collective. I've talked about this before. They put out really good graphic novels about labor and left history in Canada, and in some cases a bit beyond as well. And so if you like graphic novels, but you want like a political graphic novel, those are really good.
Okay, ThriceFan89 says, I'm not alarmed by automation as long as we have a highly educated workforce that looks after the tech and the automation in general.
You know, I think that's a good point. That you know, we can train people for new jobs. That's certainly the case. And in previous waves of automation, there have been, you know, different trainings, and now we have more. Like, for example, there was only a couple hundred years ago, pretty much everybody was a farmer or some kind of resource extraction worker. Pretty much everybody. Nowadays, though, almost no one farms. Farming is largely a mechanized process, right? Like, you know, there used to be a case where, you know, like there were very few service workers, and now the majority of people in many places are service workers. And so maybe with the new technological revolution, there'll be new waves of people in those fields. But I am concerned that new forms of automation are replacing people in ways we didn't think were possible before. And I'm not concerned by automation either, so long as the process is not rooted in the current class conflict system we have. And that's why I think people are worried, because automation with society as it is right now is basically a tool to take away from working people and further concentrate wealth among the rich and the, you know, the people fortunate enough to be educated in the specific technological needs of that automative process. And if you're neither of those, then you're sort of out on your bum on the street, right? And in a sense, the issue here is not automation, but the concentration of private ownership of major industry, which ensures that the benefits, the fruits of that automation are not adequately shared. So for instance, maybe instead of, you know, automation's happening and we're all going to lose our jobs, it's like, why don't we have a 20-hour work week or a 30-hour work week maybe? And that way automation can replace workers, but everybody basically gets more leisure time. And because we're more productive, we actually don't have to cut wages to do it. Everyone keeps the same wages they have now, and they get 10 hours less of work, 10 work hours less a week, meaning that everyone can work and everyone can get what they need. And like that's a great thing. And I think that's certainly a path forward. Or that, you know, if we are going to have a basic income, and I think eventually in a socialist society, you will need something of a basic income. It shouldn't just be tied to keeping you not poor or not suffering. It should be tied to the growth of productivity of society, so that as automation happens, the basic dividend, if you will, of a basic income should grow. And if automation is increasing the wealth of the elite very quickly, well, then I think that the basic income should always grow by at least one quanta point higher than the productivity growth of the wealthy, to always ensure that those displaced by automation are never punished for it. And I think that those are some things we have to discuss. So Ocasio-Cortez has talked about this. She said automation's great. There's a lot of jobs out there that are boring and hard and dangerous, and it would be great if people didn't have to do them. The problem is, though, is that it's not like people have a choice between those jobs and better jobs. They have a choice between that job and homelessness. And that's where automation scares people.
Okay, Craig Adolfi says, what do you think the NDP could do to grow support in Atlantic Canada? I know they're tight on money, but I can't help but think that they need some resources there.
Yeah, Atlantic Canada is very interesting. See, the party is actually doing okay in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. I mean, if you look right now at the seat projections, people are predicting doom and gloom for the NDP. But they're looking at making pickups in St. John's East and maybe in Halifax as well. We got a fairly high-profile candidate running in Halifax. She's sort of a local expert there, an activist there, who I think has a chance of flipping that riding back. And, you know, the NDP just recently formed government in Nova Scotia, and Gary Burrell is leading the party there. And we're weak in PEI in New Brunswick. But the reality is that we've always been weak in PEI in New Brunswick. The only exception has been, you know, having a major candidate like, you know, Elizabeth Weir when she was the provincial leader of the NDP. But when she left, it kind of went away. There's no or Yvonne Godin in the northeastern part of the province, which is not an NDP part of the province otherwise. So I don't know what the solution is in New Brunswick. Or PEI. PEI has always been very difficult for the NDP, especially because there's no natural labor union base in PEI. I mean, there are unions there, but it's been a sort of province that's never had a real industrial union base. And as such, it's never had an NDP base at all, like ever, or a working class base at all. New Brunswick is a bit different, but for whatever reason, the province struggles. I mean, one of the factors is that much like the NDP's longtime struggle in Quebec, the NDP struggles with francophones. And New Brunswick is about 1/3 francophone. And many of the francophones are the sort of people who vote in a left-leaning direction in New Brunswick. The Liberal Party in New Brunswick, it's not really a left-wing party, of course, but they get more support from francophones than they do from anglophones. And the inverse is true for the PCs in New Brunswick. So the NDP has never really been able to find real inroads among francophone peoples until very recently in Quebec, and never really in New Brunswick. But in Nova Scotia, there's been long-term success there. And in Newfoundland, I mean, that provincial election went about as good as it could for the NDP. The NDP only ran candidates in about a quarter of the ridings because their leader basically quit just before the election. But the NDP won 3 seats, and are polling at double what they were when that election happened. You know, still only polling at about 14, but they were polling at about 6 or 7 last election. So, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what needs to happen, but right now, I think that there's a chance for a couple pickups. Although I do think the federal party is going to be focusing resources in Ontario and BC, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea, along with, trying to protect some of the Quebec area seats. Alexandre Boulari's seat, Guy Caron's seat, and Ruth Ellen Brosseau's seat, I think, are going to be key priorities to try to defend in Quebec.
Adam B says, "Hey Christo, in your research for your Trudeau book, what did you find was the best source of information?"
I mean, it was the archives in Ottawa, the National Archives. So anybody can go. It's on the same street as Parliament, so it's on Wellington. If you go past the Chateau Laurier, past Parliament Hill, past the Supreme Court, it's like the next big building, and there is where most of Canada's important people store their documents and important organizations. So Tommy Douglas, David Lewis, Ed Broadbent, the Canadian Labour Congress, most of Canada's biggest unions, Pierre Trudeau, other prime ministers, the Liberal Party, they all stored their documents at the Library and Archives of Canada. And that's where I got most of my research. So I spent months there. Like one summer, I rented a room at the University of Ottawa Library or a campus during the summer, because they're very cheap during the summer because all the students are gone. And basically, I just lived in Ottawa for 2 months one summer and like 2.5 months the next summer, and basically just went through thousands of documents. Another great source, and they have this at Queen's, other university libraries have this too, but Queen's, I think, has probably the best collection, is we just at Queen's have 500 plus microfilm reels of old Union and Socialist newspapers. Some of them going back to the late 1800s and some of them going as late as the 1990s. And they were a really good source to see how unions were talking about things on a kind of weekly, some of the papers were weekly and some of them were monthly, but like how were unions talking about the issues of the day, and what were they ideologically like, and what were their editorials like, and you know, all of these sorts of things that weren't always covered in the mainstream media. So those were my 2 principal sources. Okay,
Monkey Liberty 86 asks, how many more seats do you think Justice Dems need to be relevant?
That's a good one. I'm not sure. I mean, certainly right now they have relevance. If you look at how much they have Pelosi and Schumer and of course the Republicans, they have them absolutely shook, then they're already relevant. Like Ocasio-Cortez alone has broken mainstream discourse in some ways because they don't know how to deal with her. Like, she short circuits like people. So I think they're already relevant. But I do feel that if they could get to even a dozen or so people, and then work with people who are sort of on the edges of being Justice Dems, like the broad progressive caucus, some left-leaning senators and Congress people that are already around. I think that could be a great sign. And I think they're going to find increased success because they're going to get more organized. They've proven in a way that maybe people didn't think was possible, say 10 years ago, that you can run insurgent left-wing campaigns against the party elite and win, or in some cases come very close to winning. And I think that that's going to be a genie you can't put back in the bottle. And I think as Ocasio-Cortez and Tlaib and Omar and Presley and others get more confident and build more networks, they're going to inspire even more people to run. And this isn't, of course, just at the federal level. You have Lee Carter in Virginia, who's, I believe, a state senator or a state congressperson there, who ran into the Democrats, but is also an open DSA member. And, so it's not just at the federal level that you're seeing the rise of left-wing challengers. And I think it's probably the best way to go. In the U.S., their party system is more stable than ours. And so I think running within the Democrats is probably the best option.
Okay. Norm Bobian, sorry, I
it's okay.
murdered that. The NDP needs to become the radical pro-worker party it was founded to be. Why would people vote for milquetoast center-left NDP when the Liberals are more established/safe? It is late. I am tired.
It's okay. That was good.
Milquetoast.
Yeah, milk toast. Yeah. Brianna's doing a great job. Guys, let Brianna know how she's doing a great job. Again, how much smoother is this with her here than when it's just me on my own? I know you guys have a great time watching when it's just me, but it makes it a lot easier for everybody, I think, when she's reading questions. So let her know in the comments. But to that question, I mean, I agree. The NDP do need to be bold. The question is that are they at least somewhere along the line right now? And I would say that this party's platform is platform is moving in the right direction. Jagmeet Singh is promoting a Green New Deal. He's talking about truly universal health care. He's talking about universal electric public transit by 2030, working with cities to make that happen. He's talking about raising corporate taxes and income taxes, but also capital gains taxes and creating a wealth tax. These are bold ideas. Tommy Douglas thought a wealth tax was too radical. He was not sure it was a good idea. Tommy Douglas. So in a sense, Jagmeet Singh is moving in the right direction. Now, could he be more strident? I think so, personally. But it's also the case that I think he's finding left-wing ideas that are popular. So I agree there's no need for a second Liberal Party. But in my view, the NDP is offering a meaningful alternative to Justin Trudeau, at least this election. At least in this election.
Okay, Lisa Hildebrandt says, has Jagmeet Singh announced a more clearly defined fiscal approach plan? I did not read anything specific on page 107 of his website commitments page. And yes, I read the entire thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, the document's great. I think at this stage, at this stage, you might see my cat Smokey in the picture. Again, if you see him, say hi. He likes people, so he might want to be on the stream. But he's right there. I don't know. You guys saw his tail, but he went right by there. No, I'm not exactly sure if we've released further details at this stage. I think it's just impressive. The NDP has released their platform, at least in a preliminary sense, very early, to give people a chance to read it, to give people a chance to absorb it, to give people a chance to talk about the implications therein. I'm sure that as we get closer to the election, the platform will gain specificity. The important part here was that it's less the specific numbers at this stage. Those matter. But, and I've noted this in some of my videos, one of the things the NDP in recent years has gotten stuck on was, well, how are you going to pay for it? The Liberals and Conservatives never get that question. We always do. But when we get that question, we shy away from the true answer, which is we're going to tax the rich. So the NDP will say, well, we're going to find efficiencies and we're going to do something or other, and we're going to have this program, but there won't be any major tax increases. And people don't believe us, and probably fairly so. And this is one of the things that I think hurt Tom Mulcair in 2015. He said no new major tax increases on the rich and new social programs, and I'm not going to run a deficit. And those things did not work. The only way they worked is if we found every Canadian household was on a pile of diamonds, and we could all use those diamonds to pay for everything. Jagmeet Singh this time has been careful. He said, look, I don't love deficits, but I'm not going to make a promise to keep deficit low at the expense of the things Canadians need. Good start. Jagmeet Singh has also said, we're going to create all these great programs. Good start. But he's also said, here's how we're going to pay for it. We're going to tax the rich. We're going to tax them on their income and on their capital gains and on their wealth. And we're going to tax the corporations. And in addition to these new taxes, we're going to beef up the CRA to get the taxes that people aren't paying right now. And they're largely wealthy people who are evading their taxes. And so in all these ways, he's made a credible case, and maybe people will disagree with his vision, but at least they'll know the NDP has a clear position. New stuff for everybody by taxing the rich. And I think that's a position you can defend more than the Mulcair position, which was like trying to square a circle. And I don't think it worked.
Adam B asks, if you could add one policy that isn't currently in the federal NDP platform, what would it be?
I would say, and I mean, I don't know if this is in the policy book or not, because the policy books and the platforms are different. The policy books are actually quite large, and there's a good chance that what I would say is in the book, but maybe not going to be in the platform. One thing I would make sure would be in there would be a commitment to greater public ownership of natural resources. I'm not necessarily a fan of nationalizing oil at this stage. We should have nationalized oil when the CCF wanted to, which is back in the 30s. If we did it there, Canada might be more like Norway than the United States. On the other hand, I do think it's imperative that whether it's solar or wind or other forms of energy, that they be publicly owned and operated for the future. And I also think that other industries that are essential towards building a Green New Deal should be owned by workers or the public or cooperatives, depending on the specific industry. A different type of ownership would be more or less applicable. But that's my view. That our plan is going to have to be one that challenges the profit motive. I guess in general, a greater commitment to challenge the profit motive, not just in healthcare, but in other sectors, would be my general idea. Other things that might not be in the platform may or may not be, but commitment to free university tuition, post-secondary tuition. I don't know if that'll be in the platform or not. It's not currently listed, but that would probably be something I add, to it. That would be, but I'm not 100% on that being in it or not right now, so I can't say.
Okay, Kevin Andrews, what do you think about the increase in temp agencies and contract work? I'm having trouble refusing unsafe work and risking my job.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of these agencies. They exist to disempower workers. I mean, a lot of jobs nowadays, even at a single employer, are very precarious because of short-term contracts and very little protection. They almost never have to fire you so much as not give you hours or just not call you when the contract is over. And that could be because they legitimately don't need you, but it could be because you were concerned about your health and safety, or you talked about unions, or you were too critical of the company's culture, or on and on and on. And so I think temp agencies are much worse for that. And I think that we do need to find a way to ensure that workers are protected across temp agencies. Jagmeet Singh, actually, one of the things he did when he was an Ontario NDP MPP was push for greater protections for temp workers. Now, a lot of those were eventually included in the Bill 115 reforms, but most of those were repealed under the Ford government. We lost a lot of those protections. There were greater protections for scheduling and hours for workers, both at contract firms and at regular employers. And also, there was a general protection for contract flipping. Now, for those who don't know what that is, it's less like outsourcing your work to multiple places, but it's like, your workplace unionizes, and then you sell your company to another person, and then the union sort of dies out with the new employer. So you flip a company with the express purpose of destroying a union and not actually selling it for, you know, a legitimate reason, right?
Okay. Jason Pichet. Oh, sorry. First, just shout out to Lisa Hildebrandt. She says that thank you for sharing your knowledge, and she gave us some support. So thank you, Lisa. So sorry, Jason Pichet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, Lisa, thank you so much for that. That's a very generous donation. I very much appreciate that. Again, folks, here, one of the ways you can, the best way you can support this channel is by watching and sharing my content. When you watch my videos and you like the videos and you leave a comment and you watch it all the way through, that tells YouTube to watch the videos more. And of course, a lot of people support me on Patreon. But of course, during live streams, super chats are a thing that you can donate to. Some of the bigger channels, they only read out their super chat comments, but I want to cover as many comments as I can. But I very much appreciate the support of Lisa and others. So thank you so much.
Okay, Jason Pichet says that he's read your book about PR. It was very insightful, but he's curious to know if you speak French because many of the books sourced in the bibliography.
My French is not as good as it could be. I did French immersion in school in New Brunswick. My mom was a francophone. She was from Madawaska region of New Brunswick, from Edmundston. My dad was an immigrant from Greece, but I went to French immersion. But for if I'm being honest, I haven't practiced my French enough, and so my French isn't very good. But in terms of reading French and consuming media in French, I don't really have an issue. Sometimes it goes fast if it's two native French speakers. I have to watch it again to get what they're saying. But most of my research, especially from Trudeau's early years, was in French, and I am, I guess, literate in French and have reading comprehension in French. One of the things you have to do in most history PhD programs is you have to be proficient in at least one additional language than English. And in Canada, at Queen's, most of us, it was French because most of us do Canadian history. But if, for instance, if you did German history, you would have to prove proficiency in German. And the way you do it is you have to take a 2-page document and in German or French or Spanish or Latin or ancient Greek or modern Greek or whatever your applicable language is, and translate it. And you have to be able to do that by the time you graduate. And so for my research, especially stuff before 1965, when Trudeau goes to federal politics, more of the sources were in French than English. So I do have French proficiency, although if I'm being honest, I'm too embarrassed to speak it in some ways because I lose my words. I have vocabulary issues, and I think if I sat down and for a few weeks just tried to speak only French, I would get a lot of it back. So that's something I do want to work on. Maybe someday if I do, I could make videos in French as well. That would be really cool.
Okay. FPS Eli asks, do you know if Jagmeet Singh plans on ending fossil fuel subsidies?
Yes, that is one of the plans for the NDP, is that they're planning on ending fossil fuel subsidies, both for the tar sands, but also for LNG. Now that's something of a controversial opinion because the BC government supports LNG, but Jagmeet Singh has been very clear that the federal party, at least in recent months, does support banning fossil fuel subsidies. Some people say that's a bit of a departure. He's always kind of taken a stand against oil subsidies, but was sort of unclear about natural gas. But he's taken a stand against subsidies. And that's another one of the things they're using to pay for the Green New Deal. They say they're going to take some of the money we're currently giving to oil companies, and we're going to give that money or use that money towards the objectives of a Green New Deal, and offering subsidies in some cases to green energy industries. So that is something we've been very clear on. Now, of course, that creates some tension with the Alberta NDP, but with the Saskatchewan NDP to some degree. But I think it's probably the correct position. Look, 50 years from now, I think we'll look back and say that was the right call.
Craig Adolfi says, the Provincial Conservative Party just called to ask me for $400 to fight the NDP and labor unions. What should I have said to them?
I mean, one thing you can do is never be rude to these people, because at the end of the day, they may be working for the Conservatives, but they're still working class people, and you should never be rude to a service industry worker, be they a telemarketer, or be they a waiter or waitress, or be they a Tim Hortons drive-through worker. But one of the things you can do sometimes is keep them on the line a little bit, because if you keep them on the line for a few minutes, that's one less call they can make. Some people have noted that. He's like, if I could keep that person at the door for 5 minutes longer during the election, they get they lose the chance to visit 2 or 3 more doors. I mean, other than that, I mean, I don't know. I would just politely say no. You can sometimes give them information. What parties want is info. If you're unclear with the party, you can sort of make it difficult for them to get their data. Because when I do phone calls for the NDP, like when I volunteered for my candidate, now he's the MPP here for Kingston. When I volunteered for Ian Arthur in his office, I made a lot of phone calls. Probably, I don't know, I think I probably made 1,000 phone calls during that election. Probably something close to that. Certainly many, many hundreds. And most of the time you would get like a dead number. You mark it as a dead number. Or the person's like, I'm not interested. Or I'm not interested and I'm voting Liberal. Or I'm not interested and I'm voting Conservative. And so you mark them in the system, and then they don't get called again. But if you mark someone, if somebody says they're undecided, they stay in the pool. They might not get called as much as a level 1 supporter, because, you know, when election day comes around, you want to give your top supporters, you want to make sure they get to the polls. But that person stays on your list of to-do pile, on your to-do pile. So I guess maybe it's like, don't show your cards. Don't say I'm never voting for the Conservatives, because then they might say, well, this guy's a waste, and then you're just helping them create data efficiency. But I don't know. I mean, I would probably just say no, thank you, and I'm not a Conservative supporter. And that's what I would do. But I mean, I don't know.
Okay, Monkey Liberty 86 asks, do you think a Sanders-Warren or Warren-Sanders ticket would work better?
I would support a Sanders-Warren ticket because I like Bernie more than Liz, although I think Liz is the second best candidate in that contest. I think that it also makes more sense. Both of them are fairly older. I don't know if it makes sense for Bernie especially to be a VP. He's already quite old, and I think the point of the VP is they're sort of an insurance policy. I would say that if Elizabeth Warren wins, then Bernie would stay in the Senate to help her implement her vision, or he would be he would maybe take a position in her cabinet. You know, and I don't know what that would be, if Bernie would want to do that, if he would ask for a certain position. And if Bernie wins, I think Bernie will pick a woman. But the challenge with Bernie and Warren picking one another is they're very similar. They're both left-leaning candidates. They're both old. They're both white. And I know Bernie Sanders is Jewish. A lot of people erase his Jewishness because it doesn't fit the narrative that Bernie's just a regular old white man. I mean, Bernie being a Jewish person is historic, given how much of a chance he has to win the presidency, because there hasn't been a Jewish person that's come so close to the presidency that I can think of. The reality is that Bernie would, and they're both from the Northeast. They're both like Northeast elites, right? I think Bernie would be more likely to pick a woman who is younger, perhaps a woman of color, and maybe somebody who has more moderate credibility. I think Bernie might pick someone like, and this is like political fiction, because Bernie has to win, and then it has to happen. I could see Bernie picking somebody like Stacey Abrams, who almost won the governorship in a southern state, who will help energize people of color and women of color to come out for a Bernie Sanders ticket. I don't know if he picks Warren. I think Warren would have the same position. She might want to stay in the Senate, or she would want to work in his cabinet. I don't know if a Bernie Warren ticket is even if I think it would be cool and it would be the ticket I would pick, like to what I would want to see. I don't know if tactically people are going to think that's a good decision.
What about Warren Kamala Harris?
Is that from you?
No.
Oh, yeah. For Brianna. Brianna asks, what about Warren and Kamala Harris? I mean, I think that could be very interesting. But then again, I wonder tactically, do they do what Hillary Clinton did? Now, she picked a terrible vice presidential candidate, but I think she picked a man because they felt they needed a man. So I wonder, like, if Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren win, do they pick a man? Do they pick a younger man? Like, especially a Warren, does she pick a younger man? Does she pick Pete Buttigieg, for instance? Does Kamala Harris go pick a younger left-leaning man to run for her, given that, you know, she wants diversity on the ticket? I don't know if that ticket would work, but I think they could find a way to work together. But I mean, Kamala Harris is going to have a lot of baggage that's going to come out about her role as a prosecutor. And despite the fact that she is a woman of color, I could see some African Americans being less than enthusiastic about her, given how, for instance, like, and we saw that Tulsi Gabbard, how she dragged Kamala Harris during that debate on her criminal prosecution record. I think that could hurt them. And there's a reason why African Americans aren't actually supporting either African American candidate overall, and I think it's because they don't have the same kind of universal credibility that Barack Obama did. And Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, I think, are leading amongst African Americans and amongst minorities.
Craig says that he's seen them selling Nina Turner swag at some of the early Bernie 2020 rallies.
Nina Turner is very interesting. That's a great suggestion, and I think that would fit my narrative, which is that Nina Turner is a young woman of color, very progressive, but I wonder if she's been in the spotlight enough at the vice president level. I mean, you think about who normally gets picked to be VP candidates; they're usually relatively high profile. Like Donald Trump picked a governor, and Hillary Clinton picked a senator and former governor, and Obama picked Senator Joe Biden, and as crazy as it was, John McCain picked Sarah Palin, and even Romney. Sorry, yeah, I was saying Rooney for some reason. Not President Wayne Rooney, but no. Mitt Romney picked what was his name again? He was a really bad. I'm actually forgetting his name right now. Paul Ryan. That's who it is, Paul Ryan. And he was a long time, he was a young guy, but a long time congressman. So I think, I don't know. I don't know if Bernie will pick Nina Turner, but it would be really cool if he did. It'd be really cool if he did.
Okay, from Joshua Hunt. Do you think that people aged 18 to 29 are motivated to vote this time around?
That's an interesting question. In the last federal election, they did. Younger people didn't vote as much as older folks, but the reason Justin Trudeau won, maybe didn't win, but won a majority, was because of higher turnout, specifically amongst Indigenous people and young people. In certain Indigenous areas, they literally ran out of ballots because they did not expect the turnout to be so high. Because so many people who were unregistered for decades came out to vote because they really, Justin Trudeau, I know most of the people on this stream, we're not Liberal fans here, but Justin Trudeau really inspired people. Like, he really did. He really got people to believe he would actually do good stuff. And I think he's alienated a lot of people. My concern is that he's created a new generation of cynical young people who see and maybe brought cynicism back into Indigenous politics. I hope not, but my concern is that could be the case. On the other hand, young people right now are very engaged in climate issues above all. Climate change is going to be a major issue in a federal election for the first time ever. It was important in 2015, but it wasn't a tier 1 issue. In this election, it's a very important issue. And for young people especially, I've seen polls where it's the most important issue. And if people feel there's a climate emergency and that climate change is going to be a key aspect of this election, you might see increased youth turnout based on that, but I'm not sure.
Okay, Lisa Hildebrand asks, PPC party candidate Mark Parvalos is running in Guelph, Ontario. I live in Alberta and I'm hearing about his right platform. Have you heard of him? If so, why is he gaining traction and is he a threat to the left?
I mean, I haven't heard of this specific candidate. I did hear about the one from London, Ontario, who basically quoted Hitler. I don't know if you guys saw that on social media. He basically plagiarized the Adolf Hitler in his like tweet, and people. He's a retired professor from Western. The PPC has some pretty loony candidates, and it doesn't surprise me. As it stands right now, however, they don't seem to be gaining much traction. Outside of that by-election in Burnaby, where the PPC got like 8 or 9 or 10 points, in the other by-elections they've run in, they've done very poor. And if you look at the polling data right now, the best case scenario for them is that Maxime Bernier keeps his seat. There's a lot of people suggesting that even that's not a guarantee. For instance, I've seen some polling say that Jody Wilson-Raybould will win her seat as an independent. That's more likely than Maxime Bernier winning his seat again as the PPC leader. But if Bernier does keep his seat, then you could see over the next election the legitimization of the PPC. And the real danger of the PPC in some ways is that they say these crazy things, which makes Andrew Scheer look less conservative by extension. Scheer can say, well, I condemn the PPC in their remarks, and he gets to look like he's standing against intolerance, when really he's just believing what he's already believed. But when you look at the PPC and say, my goodness, those guys are really bad, Andrew Scheer, he's pretty regular, then maybe this helps to get conservatives. But if the PPC gets to say 5 or 6 or 7 in the polls consistently, that's when they can start hurting Andrew Scheer. If that support is very strong in places, in certain parts of Quebec, it could cost conservative seats. And if that support is strong in the 905 region of Toronto, it could cost the Conservatives some seats. So I'm not ultimately sure about what the PPC's effect will be right now, but there's been no real momentum for them in the actual polls.
Adam B says Faith Goldie just got booted from Twitter.
Oh, did she just get booted from Twitter? Yeah, okay, I hadn't seen that. I know she got banned from Facebook, and a lot of other people got banned from Facebook. Other white nationalists, what have you. I mean, I think that's the right thing. Her views are abhorrent. And one of the first video I made, I think, that actually sort of blew up was in the aftermath of the incident in Christchurch, New Zealand, where the person talked about the Great Replacement, how white people were being replaced through migration and through birth rates by non-white people, and it was going to be the end of white civilization, and the globalists aren't going to stop it. So this guy had to take it into his own hands and do what he did. And it was horrific. And my video was basically making the case that Canadians, Goldie and Southern and Molyneux and others, Canadians are like the leading voice in some ways about this theory. And even Lindsay Shepherd, the person who basically felt persecuted because she shared the video of Jordan Peterson in her class and got told that it wasn't a good idea and tried to become famous off that. She recently got banned from Twitter as well, I think. But she basically made the same point. She's like, oh, in Mississauga when I was little, there was more white people, and now I didn't see a single white baby. And you know what she was trying to do. Without saying it, she was trying to dog whistle that this is bad and that this is a danger and we have to do something to stop it, right? And this is the motivation of the guy in Christchurch, or even the person who at the synagogue in Pittsburgh and the guy in El Paso. They are motivated by alt-right voices like Faith Goldie. I'm not saying she's criminally liable for what happened, but I think she's she contributed morally to the discourse that led to extreme violence.
Okay, and it looks like that's all the questions.
We get any other comments that we have? Nope. I see some other ones like asking me about my books. Oh yeah, see right there, just right there. Jason Peach asked one, I think. Is it coming? Maybe you're getting a delay on your phone, I think. I get it live here. Do I speak Greek? Unfortunately, I don't. I don't speak Greek. A couple reasons. One is that where I grew up in Moncton, New Brunswick, and there's no Greek community in Moncton. And so where most Greek children learn Greek in North America is they learn it through the church. That Sunday school is sort of hybrided with Greek language education. And you learn Greek there. But because there was no Greek church in Moncton, there was one in St. John, but that was over an hour away. I never really got the chance to attend Greek school. So I never learned the language, unfortunately, which has always been a regret of mine, but it, it is what it is. I wish I did.
Okay, he asked you, Jason Pichet asked, do you plan on writing another book?
I am currently working on a book. It's going slower than I thought, but I'm currently working on a book on A.R. Mosher, who was a labor leader from 1908 till 1956. For most of his life then, basically from his 20s to his 70s, he was the president of a national union in Canada. And he basically covered the railway unions, and he was a founder of the CCF, a founder of the Canadian Labor, one of the forerunners of the Canadian Labor Congress. And so he's my next topic. He was also critical of the American dominance of Canadian unions. So like he's a very interesting guy, and that's my next book project. No ETA on that, but that'll probably be my next book project.
Okay, Jeremo says that you should consider making a video on stochastic terrorism, expanding on the point you just made about Goldie. Saface at 117 says, how can students organize around asking Canadian universities to divest from Monarchia? I think your alma mater of U of T has done the most of any university around that issue, and even that wasn't that much. Yeah.
Okay, I actually don't know the definition of stochastic. I actually don't understand. If you could clarify, that would be great. I don't know the specific definition. On the Monarchia, just to clarify and maybe to expand, that's the process by which a series of universities are building an observatory in Hawaii, but it's basically on sacred ground to many of the indigenous peoples of the area. I mean, I think that I'm not sure what we can do, if I'm being honest. I think that students should approach the university and demand a change. I don't know if like you can divest here. I guess if you look, it's like, okay, are there funding agencies? Like, are there private and public funding agencies that are funding this research and construction? And if so, can you convince them to not do it because of an ethics issue? You might be able to make an argument at the university level, and I don't know if students have access to these things, but if you feel this is unethical research for a grounds, often universities could say not approve research that is unethical. And if it's so for instance, this is more with the actual research of humans, but if you're like a psychologist, you can't do research that would be deemed to cause people harm. Or as me as a historian, if I want to interview people, I have to get ethics approval to do it, because I have to make sure, especially if I'm dealing with marginalized populations, that my questions do not harm people and my questions do not mislead the nature of those people's contributions and whatnot. So maybe an ethics approach would be a way forward. But in general, I think you're right. There hasn't been a lot of willingness from the universities to really bend on this one. And I don't know what the ultimate outcome is going to be.
Okay. Adam B says, job guarantee, yay or nay, in your opinion?
Yay, I would say generally. I'm a bigger fan of a job guarantee than a basic income. I think that the way we currently operate is under this assumption that jobs exist because employers, mostly private sector, determine that there is work that needs to be done. But we know that there's effectively unlimited amounts of things that need to be done. And whether a capitalist says it's worthwhile or not, the work needs to be done. We have potholes to fill. We have children that need childcare. We have schools that could always use more teachers. We have hospitals that could always use more doctors and nurses. We have buildings that could always use more maintenance. We have public parks and national and provincial parks that could always use more tender care. We have all sorts of things that definitely need to be done, but aren't being done because of our economic system, which is predicated on, does the market determine that something needs to be done, therefore it shall be done. And I think that if we could move to a job guarantee, we could better maximize the human resources of this country. All those people who currently don't have a job, they could have a job. And frankly, people who are educated and yet not working in their fields could be given work that's relevant to their fields. I've talked about this. In academia, there's so much hand-wringing in academia right now about what are we going to do about all the PhDs we're producing and they're not getting jobs as professors or as full-time researchers, either or. What are we going to do about that? And the real answer is, at the end of the day, is that we should just give as a guarantee everybody with a PhD a full-time academic job. We could do it. The resources are there for society. Not everybody has to be a professor, but a researcher or an analyst of some kind. The skill sets are there, and those people could be put to productive work. But they're not right now because our system is based on a different model of valuation. So I would say a job guarantee is generally a great idea. And we would have, and I think it's an important one, and I think humans want to be productive. I'm not fetishizing work necessarily, but humans want to be productive. They want to contribute. 99.99% of us want to contribute, and I think if you give people ways to contribute, I think people will find ways to contribute, and I think that's very important. So I'm generally supportive of a job guarantee. Yeah.
Okay. Dramo has corrected my pronunciation. Stochastic terrorism.
Okay.
And he's also defined it, so you can go back later and take a look at that. But I think if you want to make some final comments, I think that's all the questions.
Okay. Yeah, so if you guys don't have any final questions or comments or what have you, I think we're going to wrap up. Again, things have been going great on the channel. We're getting closer to 3,000 subscribers. We're at about 2,800. The Patreon is doing very well. Many of you here give to the Patreon. I believe last time I checked earlier today, we are at about $172 a month of donations. When I get to 250, that's when I'm really going to work to upgrade my systems. I'm going to get a more professional camera, and I'm going to get a more professional microphone. And by doing that, the quality should improve. I might also buy some lighting, some independent lighting, although I'm generally happy with my lighting, so I might wait on that. And those are the sorts of things that are very helpful. So if you guys want to see those things, supporting me on Patreon is the best way to get to that objective. Other than that, again, I just want to thank you all for coming and thank you all for watching my content. Were there any last comments or questions? Or
Nope. Adam B says solidarity, guys. Keep up the great work. Great stream.
Thanks so much. And thanks so much, guys, again, for being patient. I know it was so weird with the audio thing. Brianna and I set it up, and it was working for the first minute or two, and then the mic just broke. And then we had to restart the computer and figure out that the mic was broken, and we got it working eventually. So thanks, guys, for sticking around. Again, a great turnout tonight. I think we peaked in the low mid-30s, I think. I don't know if you were seeing. 32. I think we peaked around 32. That's pretty good for a beautiful summer Wednesday night where people could be doing so much else. So, guys, thanks for spending your Wednesday night with me. And I'll see you again in 2 weeks, same time, same night. But, of course, sometimes I do surprise streams, so keep your eyes out for those as well. Have a good one, guys.